My name's Herb, and I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to our Big Book 12-step guide meeting. Please join me. We're asking in intervention style for the Spirit to open our hearts and our minds so that we can have a dialogue that will be helpful, both for ourselves, of course, but to others that are on the line and others that may hear this recording. This call is being recorded. God, please set aside everything I think I know about myself, my unmanageability, the 12 steps in you, for an open mind and a new experience with myself, my unmanageability, the 12 steps, and especially you. Please join me in the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Well, this is a once a month gathering of people who are or have an interest in being step guides. There may be people on the call that are not even aware that that's what we're here for, and that's okay too. You're welcome to be on the meeting. Give us an introduction. Jeanette is my partner here on the Step Guide, used to be called Buddy Group, and was in fact instrumental in starting the group and holding it together all the years that we weren't on Zoom. We were just on a telephone.
As Herb said, in the early days, it was a telephone call, and we didn't really have any step guides at the very beginning when Herb started doing these workshops. And the idea was mooted that it would be helpful if people who had completed the workshop may be able to be of some assistance to the next lot of people who were going to study with Herb. And we started in a very small way, and people were quite nervous because we didn't know what a step guide or what a buddy was. Who would ask? What would they ask? What if I don't know? And it was really, we just went for it. We just tried it. And as each year's gone on, we were doing pretty well now, but as I say, it's still a work in progress. And one of the main things that I hear from people is, what if someone asks me a question and I don't know the answer? I would say I don't know the answer. It's absolutely okay. And it wasn't designed to be personal development, this opportunity, but it is. For example, one of the guys I'm working with at the moment, English isn't his first language. So often as we're talking, he has to go to the dictionary and look up the English word that I'm saying to him. When it's not a word I would have looked up, he repeats the word back to me, and I learn so much. I wouldn't have thought of, going to the dictionary for some of the words I use, only perhaps one the Herb directs us to go to the dictionary for. And that's been a really interesting something that I've noticed. So we often spend time talking about the word. So what I'm saying is there is actually no format. We have no rules. It's up to you what your relationship is going to be if you were thinking of step guiding somebody. Originally and fundamentally, this is about you helping somebody with the assignments, not being their friend, not their sponsor. You may be their sponsor, but it doesn't mean you have to be. And you're able to help anybody in any fellowship. You don't have to be step guiding somebody in the same fellowship. And I can say personally, it's been my experience over these years, the personal development that I have had, and I've grown being a step guide. There are, after all these years, there's some, it's like reading the big book. You read it again and again, and some days you say, I didn't see that before. And the same thing happens as a step guide. Some of the things that the people were helping ask us, and we refer them to Herb, it just wasn't something that we would think of. So what I'm saying is we have no rules, but it is up to you to negotiate at the very beginning what you can give and what you can't give. So I think that really covers it, Herb. Do you want to come back on that?
Well, wonderful summary. Thank you so much, not only of the origins and direction, but of the purpose. That's just, and I'm going to second that as a personal development. Those of you who have been with me either on the telephone and or in workshops, personally events, or on the telephone or on the Zoom, I'm hoping that over 10 or 15 or maybe 20 years, some of you have seen some of the development that I've experienced in terms of hopefully becoming a little bit more sensitive, a little bit more considerate, a little bit more kind, and maybe a little bit more helpful in terms of the responses. And that's directly come from you, as Jeanette just articulated. And the concept of this is train the trainer. Sure, I started the workshops a long time ago, and now some of you are actually doing workshops yourself, certainly doing some one-on-one work as a step guide, in contrast to sponsorship. This call is not about sponsorship, although obviously that's not a line that is a border. No. We'll talk about sponsorship, but the primary goal here, as Jeanette mentioned, is to stay focused not on the addiction and managing your fellowship with regard to the addiction and those protocols. That's not the issue, although we do talk about it. The issue is about the step process, the big book process, the application of the specific instructions in the big book, and our experience and questions that come out of that. Because my experience with being taken through the steps 4 different times with 4 different people over a 20-year period is that we stepped outside the box. Every one of those 4 people that took me through the steps gave me a little bit of a different twist on the big book and the interpretation and the assignments. And maybe even more than a little bit, stepping outside the box, being quite ingenious, actually, and creative about an approach, especially I'm thinking of 3rd and 4th column of the resentment inventory, which has made it an incredibly, if those of you who have been exposed to and experienced with it, an incredibly penetrating instrument for both identifying the root cause and source of the problem, but also straightening out the wrinkles in our soul. So that's been really important. And that's what this is, train the trainer kind of thing. We all grow as a result of that.
Okay, I have 2 questions. So I have I'm a step guide for a girl who goes into, and I'm coming from a place of, I'm honored to be a step guide. I want to meet them where they're at. And so this girl just throws up all her food issues and all her eating and all her drama. And she also, and she calls when she wants to. And so I need to set boundaries, but I want to be nice. Help me out.
Yeah. You're wanting to be nice is a spiritual awakening.
Oh, I got that from you. I got that from doing the work.
That was a compliment.
I know, and I learned from you.
Oh, that's wonderful. So there's a difference from my standpoint between a sponsor and a step guide. And what you described is a sponsor issue, not a step guide issue. So I would ask her if she, number one, has a sponsor, and if she's talking to her sponsor about this. And after 1 or 2 minutes of a conversation concerning addiction, you just terminate that conversation and say, and what step are you on? What assignment are you on? And what have you done?
Okay.
And when I ask those questions, the conversation gets very short.
No, she's doing the assignment. She's showing up for she's a listener.
Wonderful.
And she has a sponsor.
All right.
I think I'm just a sounding board. I become a sounding board.
That's up to you. If you want to be a sounding board, you're welcome. Really, I'm serious about that. But at the same time, your role is as a step guide, and it might be a little compromised if you're not establishing that identification right up front, because then she will, in fact, misuse your time and probably not give her sponsor what she needs to be giving her sponsor.
Also, what if they're in, this is another girl, what if she's in a step study group?
Nice. Nice. What does she want from you?
She wants me to be her step guide.
And what is she doing in the step group?
She's doing her homework, and we just go over a little bit of her homework. If she has any questions,
all right. So she's using the group as an accountability partner, using you as a guide. Wonderful. That combination doesn't get any better from my standpoint. That's a real commitment to doing this work. Yeah.
Okay. Next question is about sponsorship. I have a sponsee in AA. I've sponsored her for 4 years. I've taken her through the steps. And my question is, we've become friends now. Can I be a sponsor and a friend?
That's your question to yourself. As long as you can tell her the truth and risk your friendship, yes.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah, well, and some people can't. They will shade the truth or not sort of say what their instincts are because they don't want to potentially tarnish or diminish the friendship. And then you're beginning to really lose the relationship of sponsor.
After you take them through the steps,
yeah,
do you just disappear? Or you just say, call me when you want to?
Well, that's your choice again. That's
Okay.
your choice again. It depends on what you want and what they want. You can stay as an accountability periodic sort of a sounding board for the steps. You might even develop a friendship that you want to foster. Completely your choice, sure. Well, but be clear with the person what the parameters are. I had a man come to me say, I would like you to sponsor me. I said, okay, what I do is I take people through the steps. He said, great, I look forward to that. And as we got into a little bit, then he would call me and talk to me, and I would shorten the conversation, and then he would call me and want to get together. And sometimes I would, and sometimes I wouldn't. And then he said, I really just want to have you as a friend and hang out. I said, I don't need friends and I don't hang out. I never heard from him again.
Okay.
All right. Because he was looking for something I wasn't willing to do.
Understand.
Yeah.
Very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wonderful to see you here.
A couple things I wanted to run by you. The first thing was before I started being a step guide, I had this discussion with you. I had 3 men that I had sponsored for each one of them for about 10 years. And after I did the workshop with you, I mean, I realized truthfully that me taking them through the steps wasn't thorough, wasn't complete.
Originally. Yeah.
Originally, yes. So, I told them about the workshop, and all 3 of them are on the workshop now, and I have become their step guide. Now, originally, when I spoke with you, I was going to meet with each one of them individually by Zoom or phone, whatever, and then also have the step guide group. And you suggested just having them all together at one time for a step group.
Yep.
And I want to let you know that has worked out so well.
I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been really good. We meet at 6 o'clock in the morning, Eastern time. And the reason for that is a couple of them are still working.
Yeah.
So it's been a very good meeting each week. It's been, and I'm amazed because I kind of thought there'd be sponsorship things and that kind of intermingled with the step guide thing, and it hasn't been that way at all. I mean,
Well, that's because you set it up. See, you're very clear on your intention.
yeah, and thank you for that. And the guys come and they're ready to talk about, you know, the workshop, which has been really good. So I want to give you a little bit of a good report there. And then the other thing that I wanted to ask you, and I'm really trying to embrace the set aside prayer in this, but you know, going all the way back to the beginning of my time in Alcoholics Anonymous, I've always had a sponsor that told me men work with men, women work with women, that sort of thing. Also, my original sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous he was hardcore. You know, he was about it's all AA or it's nothing, and that was his thoughts. So now that I'm entering into this step guide thing, and my hope is that, you know, going forward, that I can really be a part of this and be available to people. But I have a resistance to being a step guide to females. And it's hard for me also, Herb, with, you know, just the way I've been brought through the program of working with people that are not in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, when going back in the early days in Alcoholics Anonymous, when people with drug problems would ask me to be their sponsor, it was difficult for me. I felt like I didn't get it and I didn't know what to say to them. But I'm seeing now with your teaching that that those things might not be true. So I just wanted to hear your opinion on that.
Well, there's a couple things here. Let's go with the male and female thing. The pamphlet on sponsorship from the General Service Office of AA has, it's a very short pamphlet, has a few observations and suggestions as to sponsorship, one of which is very well put and gently put. We suggest men work with men and women work with women, and then they have sort of their reason for that, which obviously is obvious. All right, it's a very intimate process. It's just not from the book, from the pamphlet, but this is the implication. It's a very intimate process, and a lot of times intimacy develops in an inappropriate way.
Yes.
As a general rule, I'm suggesting what AA is suggesting, and I go by that. Men work with men and women work with women in terms of sponsorship. In terms of step guide, I'm not as rigorous about that, in that it depends on the situation. For instance, back in 1996, I had just finished the work, and my wife's sponsor, a woman, came to me and she said, Herb, you have an understanding of the big book and the step process that is unique. And most of the women in our area have never been exposed to that, because certainly you don't work with women, and etc. Would you take a group of us through the steps, a group of men and women? And I talked to my wife about it and my sponsor, and everybody agreed it was a good experiment. Well, that's where the workshops came from. All right. And I did work one-on-one with 5 different women in order to sort of seed the demographics of the area. And that was an agreement with my wife that I would do that. And then I stopped working with women in terms of step guide. So an answer to the question is, how are you being called to be helpful? And what are the parameters that you need in order to keep a quality of life and a quality of recovery? But mostly, how can you be helpful? So that's a balance that you need to determine for yourself in your particular area. And that's a conversation you have with God and with your sponsor and maybe with your partner, and see what happens with that. In terms of sponsorship, I have a very different attitude. All right. I'm pretty rigorous about that. Men sponsor men, women sponsor women. Now, are there exceptions? Of course, there are no rules, but as a very strong sort of a suggestion on my part, It's gender specific. Step guides a little lighter, sponsors a little bit more rigorous.
Okay.
That's with regard to male and female. I may have answered the question concerning sponsor versus step guide. They're very different responsibilities. The ideal, of course, I'm sure from Bill, he would have gone, what is this conversation, sponsor, step guide? No, they're all the same. Yes, ideally. All right. But my sponsor, who I had for 28 years, didn't know much about the book or the steps, but he was a wonderful sponsor, kind of a life coach and a 12-step recovery coach in terms of the fellowship. He was a great sounding board, and I trusted him with his wisdom and common sense. I had to go outside of his capability with regard to getting the step work done. And so I used the step guides as project managers rather than ongoing sort of sponsors, if you will.
Okay. Could you address the part about the alcohol and food and drugs and that?
Oh, yeah. That's a sponsor is in the specific fellowship. I sponsor only people in AA.
Okay.
I work with people in other fellowships, one-on-one, sometimes mostly through the workshops, because I'm working as a step guide, not as a sponsor.
Okay.
And I'll even broaden it. I've taken on an individual basis people through the steps who are not in any 12-step program and who don't have any obvious addiction, but they do want a spiritual awakening, a spiritual experience, and they've heard about me through their churches or through their therapists or through some other mechanism. And they say, I want to go through the steps. I don't have any addiction, but I really am thirsty for the spiritual awakening or experience. And now I can count on one hand the number of people who have come to me with that. And most of them have finished the work and had a powerful experience. But they have real disadvantages because they don't have a fellowship and they don't have the vocabulary.
Yes.
And quite frankly, they don't really have the incentive. Addicts have an incentive of hopelessness and quality of life. A non-addict really doesn't have that unless they're really motivated.
Well, thank you so much, Herb. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Great questions. Those are fundamental questions for us to have at least a sense of. No, thank you so much.
I thought I heard you say that people, I'm an FA, people that have breaks do not have spirituality, because if you have spirituality, you would not have a break. Did I hear you correct?
I would never have said that.
Thank God, because that made me feel like.
Yeah, no, I would never have said that. What I would have said is that if in fact you have relapses, there's something amiss with your spiritual life. But if you're hearing my words, that's a much more gentle observation than what you said, which was more black and white.
Okay.
Yeah.
It gives me hope. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we're so human, and Bill says it in step 10, when they crop up. And if in fact you've entered the world of the spirit, I'm quoting or paraphrasing from step 10, pages 84 and 85, we enter the world of the spirit, we are placed in a position of neutrality. If you're not in a place of neutrality, something's amiss. It doesn't mean you don't have a spiritual life. It just means you don't have an effective spiritual life. Because if you had an effective spiritual life, you'd be placed in neutrality according to the book. And I embrace what the book says.
So I had a couple of questions. I've been taking someone through the third and fourth column, and I try to sort of keep it simple and just say, okay, the third column is about the lies you believe, and the fourth column is about the truth, and then we get to self-esteem. And this particular person, it's sort of similar to me, doesn't have like this overblown opinion of herself. It's more a lower opinion of herself. So she has a hard time going, well, I'm the best, this. So I just tell her that self-esteem is sort of what are the shoulds. I really
Good.
focus
Excellent.
on that.
That's a code breaker. That really is helpful. Yes.
Yeah. And then I started thinking about it, and it's really sort of, what is my script? What do I believe that I'm living by, that I believe everyone else should live by? And that's to be helpful. And then with the pride, I do what I believe you did, was just take the words from self-esteem and put it in the pride.
Yeah.
So that seems to be working.
Yeah, those are all wonderful. I've experienced it. Techniques for helping people sort of part the curtain that they can't see through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this person tends to want to really talk a lot. So I keep going, okay, it's not about the story, not about the story. And she's gotten to the point where she goes, oops, I'm back in the story, so she's figured that out. But then we get to the fourth column and we go over the perceived role, and we go through all that. And I say the self-seeking is about your behavior, and the selfishness is your motives, your attitudes. And we go through that. And then we get to the turnaround part, the last question. And I don't know, I don't feel the turnaround, but maybe that's not for me to feel. I don't know.
Well, what are they experiencing?
Well, I finally just asked her, I said, okay, do you feel good about this? Do you feel like you really can see this differently now? And she goes, oh, yeah. So I'm just assuming I'm doing the right thing.
It's good. It's good. There's another question that you might want to ask when they say, yes, I'm seeing some. Ask them specifically to describe their role, their motive, their contribution to their resentment, not the event, not the circumstances, but to their resentment, because that's really the key here. What's your role and responsibility in creating this resentment?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you seem to indicate, and it may not be exactly what you're doing, but it's what I heard, and that is that you're telling them up front that the third column is the lie and the fourth column is the truth. I don't do that. I don't give them any warning as to what they're going to experience, because it sets up in their head some type of a potential wall or criteria, and they begin to look for that rather than to look for whatever else comes out of the worksheets.
Okay, that's good.
I wait till after they finish the third and fourth column before I ever introduce those two words.
Okay, that's very helpful.
Yeah.
Because I tend to compare myself with you and everyone else are these wonderful teachers, and I don't think I have that gift.
Well, no. Au contraire. Get over yourself, because the way you just articulated it, you absolutely have the gift.
Okay.
No. How you just articulate, I'm very impressed with your clarity and the way that you set it up. No. You're absolutely gifted with the knowledge and with the experience.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Wonderful.
Okay.
I have 3 questions. The first one has to do with, I was asked to join a small group of 5 women, and we met for the first time on Saturday. And one of the gals in the group has texted me, and I worked with her today. And her question was focusing on the body. By the way, she's got multiple addictions in both AA and OA and some other things, but those are the 2 things that we share. She said, focusing on the body worksheet, I'm having some trouble pinning down what my addiction is. Do you have some time tomorrow to talk? So we talked today, and after teasing out, what her experience in OA and AA were and kind of clarifying that, she said that she wanted to have her addiction be crazy thinking. I just want to ask you if I did the right thing. I said, well, crazy thinking, and I shared the line from the big book about the problem centers in our mind. I said, crazy thinking is actually the first part of the first step. It is, everyone has, I hope I wasn't too bossy about this. I said, everybody has crazy thinking. It comes out regardless of what your addiction is. So I'm asking for some feedback there.
Sure. So many thoughts and questions. So when she talks about crazy thinking, how does it manifest in her life?
I did ask her about that. We returned to the worksheet, the addiction worksheet. So I tried to put it in black and white terms. And I said, how would you answer these questions about what happens when I indulge in this addiction? Would you be able to give 3 examples, your history of your attempts to deal with it and to stop after you start, and these sort of things? And I wasn't sure. I didn't want to be so, as I said before, bossy, but I was able to get her to see that it was much. I said what you told me and what you tell a lot of people. Pick one of your sources of suffering. I picked my alcoholism, as you know, in 2004, and I picked my food addiction in 2011. And then other times that I visited, I've done different things. Anyway, she finally settled in on food. And just like me, her food addiction is multifaceted. It's not just powerless over food. I'm powerless over, dieting, my body image, the number on the scale. A lot of these things. And she also has a lot of behaviors attached to her food addiction. Anyways, we went over that and she said, oh, it would be way easier to do this body worksheet if I focused on that. I would definitely have answers for that.
For the food addiction.
Yes.
And that would have been my explanation to recognize that that's what she focused. That's a really specific addiction, all right, by any definition, is the repetitive behavior over which she has control. And that's going to be the body part. The crazy part is going to come out in mind assignment and the mind worksheet. And
right.
When we talk about, and you might really help her with this, because I think it helps most people, and that when the book talks about insanity or crazy, it's talking about it a very literal standpoint of the meaning and word root of the word insanity, coming from, and you've heard me say it, sanus, Latin for health. Mm-hmm. And when you put an I in, it's unhealthy. So release the psychiatric implication, the psychological implication, the emotional implication. Release that and just know that, oh, that's unhealthy. And then I'll put it, and you've heard me say it, in the framework of, if in fact you walk into a wall once thinking that you could walk through it, and you bang your head and you get off the floor and you look at it again and you still have the thought, I can walk through the wall, and you bang your head. If you do it the second time, all right, you will probably, if you're normal, go, oh, I was mistaken. But if you're an addict, you will get up 10 times saying, I need to put a helmet on. I need to run faster. I need to have a better position. I need to have a better thought. I need to try harder. And you will end up with a broken neck. That's the difference between healthy and unhealthy. Healthy people learn with 1 negative or 2 negative experiences. Unhealthy people do not learn.
Yep. Until
they die.
Okay, second question. It's an observation and a question. So when I took the workshop in 2004, most people had some years of experience in some sort of fellowship. I had 20 years at the time, and the set aside prayer was especially pertinent for those of us who thought we knew everything.
Right.
And over the years, and then in 2011, and then most recently, I see a lot of people who are new to recovery coming to your workshop. And so my question is, do people who are new to recovery do well in this workshop?
It depends on a lot of things. Great question. And I don't know the answer, but I would assume that if they're ready for it and they stay with it and they do the work, that they will have an experience, usually a big experience. The problem is they may not be desperate enough to stay with it because, as you know, first 3 steps, a lot of work, but pretty easy work. You get to the 4th step, all right, I lose 30 to 40% of the people someplace in the 4th step.
Yep.
I've never done the demographics, but I'm assuming that it's people who haven't suffered enough.
Yep. Oh, and that made me think of something else. This step, this small group, and also the 2 women who have reached out to me because I'm on the step guide list, have all started the workshop in July. And because I'm me, I signed up for the workshop in July. Like I probably should do this over again and be where they are. And it's been, 4 nights. Okay, I really wish I had time for 4 nights of Herb, for 4 days of Herb.
There might be a separate 12-step program for you.
HO.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyways, I signed up, but I find myself, it's too hard to go. And so how important is it? I really want to be where they are. And is that over? I guess the question is that overdoing it?
Probably is overdoing it. If you had the time and the inclination and you found it helpful, and as you find it helpful, fine, but you've done the steps and that's what they're doing. Yeah. So you 90% of it is going to be what you've heard. There might be 5 or 10% because I'm changing all the time in terms of my vocabulary as well as my insights that you haven't. But that's going to be, at this point, that's going to be incidental. It's going to be muy poco.
Okay, thank you, Herb.
Yeah, thanks very much. And see, the desire to be helpful, that's what underneath everything that you were saying is the desire to be helpful. And that's really the key, is to look through that lens of how can I be helpful? And then again, in answer to this last comment is, how can I have balance in my life? And that's maybe going to be a chronic question for most of us on a daily basis. And that's why that meditation practice in the morning is so important, because it keeps us conscious of balance or unbalance eventually anyway. Thanks, Kathy, very much.
I find myself enthusiastically wanting to fix. And sometimes, and I'll kind of leave it there, but while I'm in the midst of that, I'm thinking I need to be asking a question. I don't need to be making a statement. And you're so, I'm just in the short time I've been working with you over the last 3 years or so. I've seen you get so skilled at that.
Yeah.
I just wondered if you had any sort of, okay, here's what to listen for, or, here's how to stop that fixing process.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's wonderful consciousness that you know that that's part of your dynamic, and staying focused and asking for help on a daily basis for that, to minimize that wanting to fix them, although that's part of the energy that brings you to want to help. All right, knowing that you do have exposure, you do have experience, you do have knowledge that will in fact be helpful. But how do you communicate it? This is my chronic sort of energy, is how can I be helpful in this moment? Maybe it's teaching. Maybe it's actually explaining something, giving them some information. Most of the time, people, well, it's not true. Scratch that. It's not most of the time. Some of the time, people benefit from a question. It's kind of like, oh, I've never thought of it that way. Don't answer it. And actually, and you've heard me say it, I'm not asking you to talk to me about this. I'm asking you to ask yourself this question. Later on, we can have a conversation, but allow the question to percolate. You know, and a lot of people don't understand what that means, but eventually they do. All right. But yeah, because that was my experience. I mean, the Joe and Charlie, my initial exposure to making the big book interesting was Joe and Charlie. During those first 4 years when I was literally thawing out in Alcoholics Anonymous, I listened to their recordings. I've never seen them personally. And they said, the big book, filled with answers, but it's also filled with questions. And you'll recognize the questions in the big book because at the end of the sentence, there's a question mark. Oh my God, it was so funny. But they treat it as a stop sign. The question mark is a stop sign. Stop, ask yourself that question. And then and I've combined all of this comment. One of my teachers is Richard Rohr, and he said, and use the question in the milieu of prayer to allow it to percolate, to bubble, and have an energy from the asked but unanswered question, the energy to take you to a place that you have never been aware of before. Brilliant. It's brilliant. And anybody on this workshop, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir because you've already experienced the power of the question in the milieu of prayer, especially the set-aside attitude in prayer. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. In fact, something I don't say often enough, and I've been reminded about it recently, the man who took me through the steps the third time regularly said, almost every meeting we had for 2 years, once a week, he said, Herb, turn the answers in the big book, turn the statements into the big book into questions and see if it breaks it open. And that was a wonderful technique of getting some additional exposure to an experience with the information and experience of the big book.
Okay.
Turn the answers, turn the statements into a question. Play with it. I'm not giving anybody suggestions as to do this rigorously with every statement in the, no, I'm not doing that at all. But I'm saying there's a technique that could make it a lot more interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks.
Gonna work on it.
Two things. Number one, the last conversation reminded me that one time I learned that WAIT stands for why am I talking? I had to deal with that.
No, I hope everybody heard that. It's a great mechanism for pause, to be conscious. Why am I talking? I mean, and you know, Al-Anon has a whole bunch of things. They say a whole list of things. Am I the person to be saying it? Is it the truth? What's my motive? There's several other challenging questions in that pause.
Yeah. Here's my question. I'm taking a couple people through the workshop. Every year I take a couple through and our group. And we go into great detail with the fourth step. And then they might ask me to give their fifth step to me.
Normally, yeah.
And after I've been through everything in gory detail and heard all the resentments and all the fears and all the sex inventory, what's my role as a fifth step? I mean, what do they do for the fifth step? Where's the encore here?
Well, great question. Really, seriously. My experience with that is that it's a very different experience because I'm there to listen while they read out loud something that they may have written over several months or sometimes several years. They've done their fourth step in discrete segments with some delays in between. And they've written it down and they've talked about it, obviously in depth, but discreetly, meaning in segments. And in the fifth step, this is the very first time they're saying it out loud, continuously, out loud, continuously. And my experience is within 2 to 3 hours of it, it washes over them in a different way. And as a person who took them through the steps, I'm actually hearing it at a different level. Not that I'm making any comments about it, but I'm also witnessing their experience with it. And it allows me to make some notes and or make some comments about it, as you've heard me share about taking people through the fifth step. So for me, yes, sometimes it's very redundant and sometimes it's quite, yeah, well, we've been there. Boring even, yeah, they'll deal with it because it's not boring to them. This is their life. This is their sacred journey and they're hearing it after 2 hours, maybe minimum, 4 hours, probably maximum, someplace in there, they're hearing it for the very first time. That's my experience with it.
So let me understand, try and understand what you're saying. So they would read to me their writing,
everything
going through the columns, the fears,
yes,
and just from the format. So we wouldn't have a lot of the discourse that we have when we're having our weekly. Yeah.
My comment regularly is in the fifth step, they do 90% plus of the talking, maximum 10% or less. It's not a discussion. It's not therapy. It's not a conversation. And it's certainly not a sponsored teaching moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's a listening, deep listening. Yeah.
Last question. Is it, I'm going to say should. I don't like that word.
That's okay.
Should I encourage them to share with their sponsors the work that we did? Because my experience was that I had a sponsor before I did your first workshop about 5 or 6 years ago. I had done fifth steps with her and they were not satisfying and I didn't really get anything out of them. Right. She's still my sponsor, but she's never been through your work. Right. And then I gave it to my step guide.
Yes.
And it was such a different experience.
Yes.
And yet I know that my sponsor, that's part of the thing we're encouraged to build with a sponsor is yes. that kind of, openness. And so.
Great question. I mean, really, seriously, excellent question. And so ask your sponsor what she would like to hear of that. Would she like you to read it all, or would she like a Reader's Digest version of it? But yes, I think it's actually an important thing I suggested, that if somebody gives their fifth step to a step guide or somebody other than their sponsor, that they ask their sponsor what they want to hear, the whole thing, which is okay, or a summary of it in some fashion that's determined in a conversation between you and your sponsor.
Yeah. Okay. That's
I
great.
think that's a very important step because it, as you just said, it brings the relationship that you want to foster to a deeper level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I'm not sure quite how to ask this question, but it comes up a lot when I go to OA, big book workshops, when I go to meetings. There's opinion out there that when you get a sponsee, they put down the food and you get them through the steps as quickly as possible. And I don't think I've ever taken a sponsee, whether they're experienced or they're new, quickly through the steps. I just don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, I mean, here we take a deep dive into every step. So I'd like to hear about your view on that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are doing that. It says if it takes more than a month, you're not moving fast enough, or even 2 weeks. I'm like, well, what kind of help is that? So I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, so you guys are asking such great fundamental questions. It's really good, solid stuff. And that is, let me just, historical context. Bill Wilson went through the 6 steps of the Oxford group in 2 days, detoxing in the hospital. His second day in the hospital, he was exposed to the steps. In his 3rd day, he had his spiritual experience. Now, I don't believe he ever went through the steps again until he probably addressed them in the big book, Creating 12, and or maybe later on when he wrote the 12 and 12 in 1953 when he was 20 years sober. So I don't know his particular journey, but back in the day, before they had the big book, 1935 to 1939, they did the steps out of the Oxford group, those 6 steps, and they did them in 1, 2, 3, 4 days. Do you have a problem with alcohol? Yes. Do you want to quit? Yes. Do you believe in God? Yes. Get on your knees and give your life to God? Yes. Go upstairs and write your inventory. We'll wait. Yeah. An hour or 2 later, they came down and they gave their inventory. 5th step. Now go out and make your amends. Oh, yeah. No. It was like, whoo. All right. So I'm all for going through the steps quickly the first time. Sometimes I hear about the AWOLs in the food programs, which are a superficial journey through the steps by at least my standards. I totally endorse that at the beginning. Somebody goes to a workshop, a Joe and Charlie kind of workshop over a weekend, Friday night through Sunday, and they go through the steps. I totally endorse that. There's a man who wrote a book called Back to Basics, Wally P. Mm-hmm. He'll take you through the steps in a day or a weekend or a week or a month. He's got a whole profile on doing the steps over a 1 month period. I totally endorse that. Get somebody into the steps, get somebody through the steps, have all of the panoramic view of the tools and the steps. But if you think you've done the steps in a week or a weekend or a month, you're delusional. Well, you know, and you've said it, we go really deep. I've never had anybody take less than 6 months, and most everybody average between 6 months and 18 months of going through the steps.
And that you're making such an important point here, because you said at the earlier part of the session, if you can't put the food down, it's because you don't have an effective spiritual life. So if you take somebody through the steps, and the whole idea is to be abstinent while you work the steps, but you
No. The whole idea is not that. That is a misinformation of glacial proportion.
So many people say you can't work the steps unless you're abstinent.
And that for me would be a complete misunderstanding of step 1.
So
Wait a minute. Step 1 is powerless. Does that mean you don't have a choice?
Yes.
If you don't have a choice over your addiction, how can you work the steps on the assumption that you're abstinent, because the whole point of working the steps is to achieve abstinence.
I agree with you 100%. But the going thinking is you have to be, and I'm thinking, how do you get absent before you've had an effective spiritual experience? You say, well, through grace. How do you get grace, Herb?
Through working the steps.
Exactly. So this is
And
great.
yet there's a conundrum there, isn't there?
Yes.
How do I even approach the steps without grace? So there is that, and I've talked about it, grace and willingness. I don't know how it works. I know that it works. My willingness and action in God's grace. Which comes first? I have no idea. It's an academic question and it doesn't matter. What I know what the big book says, the big book is very black and white. We do not get abstinent neutrality until we finish the 9th step. Read pages 84 and 85. Page 63, the promises of the 3rd step, says you might have some approximation. The promises of the 5th step, page 75, says you might have some approximation. But after the 9th step, it says you will be placed in a position of neutrality, no approximation.
This is great. Thank you so much.
Well, it's such an important question, and I don't have a public argument with anybody about people's opinions or people's interpretation. But from my standpoint, it's a complete misunderstanding of step 1. So they challenged me. Well, would you take somebody through the steps who's drinking? I go, well, absolutely.
Wow.
But not on the day that they're drinking. All right. I asked them not to drink that day, and then we'll go through the steps that day. But how can they not drink until they find power? And how can they find power until they finish the steps?
Exactly.
Yeah, I know exactly. Yeah. And it's my interpretation of the big book, and everybody's welcome to theirs.
Okay.
Yeah, I do not argue about that. I state my interpretation and my experience.
So that for the person who's still drinking, you might talk to them 3 days a week when they are not drinking, and they might drink on the others, and hopefully over time you'll talk to them more.
Well, or I'll talk to them, but it's not about the step work. And I had somebody who was relapsing for 10 years going through the steps. And then he caught traction, got sober, all right, and he was sober for about 10 years. Unfortunately, his spiritual malady manifested in a food addiction. He gained 100 to 150 pounds and died of a heart attack. But I mean, that's a story for a different day. I'm just saying he lived in a dumpster 2 years before he met me. And then he, over this 10-year period of coming to meetings, sometimes drunk, working the steps, all right, in between the times we were talking, he would drink, not the days we were talking. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Herb. This was really helpful.
Well, again, it's a fundamental question, and it needs such clarification. And don't argue with anybody about this. Merely share with them your experience, your observation of the big book, your interpretation of the big book, and let them make up their own minds as to what their conclusion and interpretation is.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Well, again, I'm looking through the lenses. How can I be helpful? I'm not going to be helpful if I want to be right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Hi, Herb. This workshop is phenomenal. I listen intently because I get so many words that I can use with the people that I work with. And that's why I listen. That's not, I mean, that's why I came. I ended up having some transformational experiences, very gratefully, but the most important thing is so I can be helpful to the people that contact me.
Right.
So I have a couple comments I want to make, and then I have a question. And the comment is, I just recently heard that WAIT acronym, and I love it. What am I? Why am I talking? But it's also, what am I thinking?
Oh, all right.
And that really helps me with my 10 steps.
Yes.
You know, to ask myself, what am I thinking?
Wonderful.
So, and it's
Because that's about the pause.
that's the pause. I was going to just say that. That's the pause muscle that my big book guide originally told me in 2013 when I first started working with a big book guide. She said that you have to exercise your pause muscle. and I'll tell you, all these years later, I'm not that great at it, but I'm working on it. And pause is pray and use spiritual energy. I love acronyms.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, we get quite cute with them.
All right. So I'm an English teacher. I like that stuff.
Oh,
Anyway,
there you go.
so I'm a compulsive overeater in OA and have been for many years, since 1981. And in OA, abstinence is refraining from compulsive eating and compulsive food behaviors. And I've always said that I think that compulsive eating is a substance disease as well as a process disease.
I'm sure that's correct. Yeah.
And that's also why it's important for me to ask, what am I thinking? Because it's the thinking that, you know, that drives me to the scale, to the cookbooks, to the whatever it is that's the process part of my addiction.
Yeah.
So I wanted to share that. And also I wanted to ask this question. So believe it or not, I've sponsored a couple of men over all these years, only very rarely and with parameters around it. Right now, for the last 5 years, I've been sponsoring this guy. And when he has an issue that is not appropriate for us to discuss, he's in another program and he can go there. And he knows that. He's got, he really wanted to work with me, and I really wasn't going to take his sex inventory, quite frankly.
That's the way I handle it. Yep.
And I was willing to do all the other work with him, but that's neither here nor there.
I actually think it's here. I think those are wonderful clarifying comments that were not as clear in the conversations that I've had previously. That was very relevant. So go ahead, please.
Okay, well, very good. Well, anyway, so we were having this discussion about this morning, actually, about process and physical allergy, and Thursday night we're working on the problem with the body. And so we were trying to figure out how the problem of the body manifests itself in a process addiction, because he's also in a process addiction fellowship.
All right.
Purely. And, I said to him, I really don't understand exactly what it is. I'm thinking that maybe it has to do with dopamine and the thought process and the chemicals that are, and so I wanted to ask you what you thought. The physical, it's all theory, I guess, because we don't really know.
Well, it is science and theory, and I don't even want to address that part because I agree 100% with what you've said up to this point. And but I think your question is, how does a process addiction manifest in repetitive behavior?
Okay.
All right. That's it. Do you lose control of your use of pornography? Do you lose control of your gambling? Do you lose control of your credit card and buying? Do you lose control behaviorally? Yeah. Now, I guess maybe as a refinement, because you talked about thinking earlier, do you lose control in your compulsive thinking? By definition, compulsive is a loss of control. Yeah.
So, it's food, like you've said many times, the food addiction is very bizarre in that everybody's individual. And some people might have, I'm almost embarrassed to say this on a group, such a large group, but I have binged on lettuce. Okay. Now, lettuce is not necessarily so delicious. You know, it's pretty tasteless, actually. And I'm not talking about dressed lettuce. I'm just talking about plain old.
I get it. Yeah.
And I mean, that was many, many years ago. But when I was looking to fill that hole in my soul,
Yep.
I was going to fill it with whatever the heck I could fill it with, or that I could rationalize was not going to harm me or make me fat or whatever.
Right.
So obviously, if I would abstain from every food that had caused a physical addiction, if in fact food causes a physical addiction like sugar or flour, you know, those things is easy to abstain from.
Yeah.
But I remember saying when I first came into program, I will never be able to eat again because I binged on everything. It depended on whether or not I wanted to gain, I didn't want to gain weight or whatever it was. And I can say that in an OA meeting. I can't believe I'm saying it here. And I'm really feel very humble, I think. I'm not sure what I feel. But that's not been my behavior for almost 40 years. I'm very, very grateful to say. But the thing is, the physical allergy, yes, I know that if I take sugar in my body, for example, eventually, maybe not right away, I'm going to go off crazy. I also know that if I have more than my prescribed amount, like you were talking about quantities, that same thing could happen.
Yeah.
So it's not really necessarily a physical reaction to the substance. And that's where people get caught up in OA so much.
Oh, all right. All right. Yeah. Yeah. I could see that connection with the lettuce to the mind problem.
Yeah.
Somehow it triggers a compulsive thinking that then, but again, we're getting too much into theory and speculation.
Okay.
The problem is that you observed this behavior of compulsive eating with lettuce, and now you don't do that. So somehow there's been a gift of freedom.
Right, and I don't want anybody to think I only binged on lettuce. I mean,
no, we don't have that. We don't have that. We're very clear on.
Yeah, I mean, I binged on anything that anybody else binged on, but it's just people split hairs so much in the 12-step and compulsive eating.
In the eating area, there's a lot of rigidity and a lot of splitting hairs and a lot of control issue. And I understand it because it's about weight and it's about body image and there's lots of moving parts here. Yep, I understand. It's just not healthy.
I know, and I've been graced, thank you God, since 1981 to have a healthier viewpoint about all this.
There you go.
I just wish to heck I could somehow figure out how to pass it on to more people. That's
your invitation.
Mm-hmm.
No, seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Take it seriously. That's not a throwaway line here on this call today.
Mm-hmm.
That's a specific invitation based on your background, your history, your experience, both in terms of your addiction as well as your recovery, to now be a lantern. You don't have to be Janie Appleseed, but maybe you do. But maybe you do. So just keep it open, find out what's the invitation for me here. I've got a lot of exposure, I've got a lot of experience, and I've got a lot of energy, and I really want to help. Boy, I'll tell you what, that's a combination for meditation, isn't it?
Yes, it is, Herb. You're giving me a dose. You're giving me a dose of my own medicine. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's where the set-aside attitude comes in, as well as sponsorship.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be sponsorship, or it may be a good friend, or it may be a spiritual director. It may be somebody professional who would help you sort out. So what's real here, and what's just maybe part of my ego dysfunction? Mm-hmm. There you go.
Thanks, Herb.
Yeah, well, because I mean, those are the things I go through. those very questions, that very energy. That's correct. Yeah. Thanks very much.
Okay, I have a lady who makes appointments with me for guidance as a step guide and cancels. So she's done that to me 3 times now.
Mhm.
So do I continue letting her make the appointment and cancel, or do I say something to her?
Oh, you definitely say something. You definitely say something. What step are you on?
3 and 4. And then she wants me to hear her 5th step, but she hasn't told me anything about 3 and 4. And then she wants to do a 5th step. So
Are you saying column 3 and 4 or step?
column 3 and 4.
Oh, okay. So she's in step 4 and you've given her some assignment in column 3.
No. She's made appointments. She wants my help as a step guide, and we always make an appointment, but she cancels before keeping any of the appointments. And she's done it 3 times now.
And what would you do if she kept the appointment? What would you do with her if she kept the appointment?
I would ask her where she is. Did she want to do any readings on column 3?
If she wanted to do, you're giving her way too much latitude. Are you her step guide or her mother?
Okay.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So if she's, has she done columns 1 and 2 in the resentment inventory?
Yes.
All right. So have you given her an assignment in column 3?
No.
Email her an assignment in column 3, a reading assignment, and tell her to call you when she's ready to discuss it.
Okay. And if she cancels on me again?
Tell her to reschedule the meetings, the call. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about a phone call, not a physical meeting, right?
No, she wants to do a Zoom meeting, but we've been chatting by email.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, let's set up the Zoom so we can talk, but she always cancels on me.
Give her an assignment, make an appointment, and tell her to make an appointment on Zoom when she's ready to discuss the assignment. And then if she cancels that appointment, indicate this is the 4th time you've canceled. I can't work with you unless you absolutely commit to keeping your appointments. Otherwise, you're not serious.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah,
Okay.
you don't have the responsibility to chase her, nor to be inconvenienced by her in a serious way like this. She's just balking, and the big book said, at some of these we balk. My experience is at all of these we balk. So she's just doing the normal human thing.
Okay.
Yeah, but give her an assignment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. My other question is, I have a small group and everybody's at different levels. And this is the Monday, Tuesday workshop group.
Great.
And one of them is keeping pace with you.
Yes.
So she's working on her fear and fear inventory, and she wants to finish. She has a plan. She told me her plan of how she's going to finish her 4th step.
Great.
And so it's kind of made the rest of the group feel like they're so far behind and they're never going to catch up. And so I don't know how to address the other people that are not on pace with you in the workshop.
Sure. Yeah. Do they have a plan, the other people?
No. So
Tell
they
them
need
to
to
Tell them to get a plan.
Okay.
And their feelings are none of your business.
Yeah, I'm starting to develop a relationship with them. So I feel like if one of them drops out, I'm going to feel like I didn't do a good job or something, or whatever.
Yeah. Well, that's your work, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. That's your Al-Anon work, isn't it? You're not
Yes.
responsible for their recovery.
Yeah. Okay.
You're passionate about it. I love the energy. All right. But there's that detachment issue, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't mean to say that it's easy, but that's, that's what is, in fact, probably the heart of your own Al-Anon program, right? Yeah.
But none of them are Al-Anon. None of them will admit to being Al-Anon.
Yeah, but you are.
Yes, that's right. Okay.
So their problems are not your problems. So
That's
don't
right.
make them, don't make their problems your problems, and
Yeah,
don't
right.
make your problems their problems.
Right. Okay, thanks.
All right. Thanks, Lynn.
I've been helping Jo with her women's workshop. One of the questions I have is I'm 7 years sober, and I have a sponsor in AA, and who hasn't done this work. And it was similar, my experience was similar to yours with your first sponsor. We did it together, but it was pretty quick, and it wasn't as nearly as in-depth or helpful,
Right.
transformational as it has been this last year.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious. So Jo is my step guide still. And I'm curious if I really need, I never talked to my other sponsor. She's kind of dropped off. We used to have a weekly appointment, and now she took a new sponsee, and she just like doesn't have time for me. So, and I'm not quite sure what to talk to her about anyway. So I just like clarification on that if I can.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're raising a question that you need to answer. Yeah. Do you need a sponsor? What do you expect from a sponsor? Why do you need a sponsor? You have a step guide in Jo. It's not going to get any better than that, quite frankly.
I agree.
And you could actually have that discussion with her about your perception of and need for and reason for and ingredients of a sponsor. And she probably would have some ideas about that. But you're asking the right question. I do believe you need a sponsor in AA. That's your primary, or at least your longer term fellowship. Yeah. And so it doesn't sound like you, quote, need a rush, but you're in a position now where the person you've been relating to as sponsor both doesn't have time, and you're not able to relate to her as well anymore. Sounds like time to move on.
Well, and I did invite someone else or ask someone else in AA to be my sponsor, but then she's like, well, what do you need? And I'm like, I'm not quite sure.
Well, I'm so glad that she asked that question. That's an experienced sponsor. Exactly.
Yeah. So thank you so much. And I appreciate you, and I appreciate this workshop. Thank you.
What I needed in a sponsor, you didn't ask me, but I'm going to suggest, is
Okay.
I needed a sounding board, and I still do. I have a sponsor. I call him once a month. We normally talked about getting together once a month, which we did, but with COVID, we now just call. He's an older gentleman like myself, and I check in with him, not because I need him, but because I want a resource as an accountability partner at some point. And my needs changed over time, as yours do have and will.
And I think also what occurred to me was community, and someone in person here would be good, would be helpful, like to do a step 5 or something like that.
Or step 10.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Same time zone would be good. Yeah.
Well, no, actually. And so in prayer, make a little list of a profile of what a sponsor you might want to have in a person as a mentor, life coach, guide. Accountability partner is my most favorite word. Yeah, wonderful.
I've been abstinent in OA for 33 plus years, and working the steps, and I've been in HOW 12 years. So that's a long story, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't, right. Currently, I don't have an official sponsor.
Yeah.
And I haven't had one for a while. I have my therapist, who I talk to very regularly.
Yeah.
I have a dear long-term abstinent friend who is steeped in the big book, and I'm completely accountable to either both or one of them. Well, definitely to my therapist all the time.
Yep.
And often to my dear friend. Like, we can tell each other anything, that we don't tell other people. And I get tremendous step guidance from her.
Yeah.
And I feel a tiny bit fraudulent because I don't have a sponsor.
Well, no, but what you have is a sponsor. That's just a name. What's the function? The functions that you described in terms of your therapist and your friend, isn't that really the role?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. I mean, when I call my girlfriend, because she helps me with the steps, he doesn't. But he helps me with my honesty about myself. And when I call her about a resentment or an amends or things that I question, she really does guide me better than anybody else I know can. And she knows me for so long. So yeah, I'm glad I could bring that up.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. There's a book on sponsorship published by Hazelton called 12-Step Sponsorship. Hamilton B is the author. Hazelton, it's the best book. If anybody's interested in looking at some more experience, it's very worthwhile reading. But keep in mind, so what's the purpose of it? I have a spiritual director who I'm very confident that would be the person I went to. He's not in a 12-step program, but he would be the person that I would go to if I really had an issue that I wanted to sort out. I have two daughters that are both 30 years, one in Al-Anon, one in AA, and wisdom women who have done this work out of the big book. And both with very different personalities, and I will talk to them about different things, and not obviously in the same way you would talk to your friend, but so there's different roles for different people, especially at an age and stage where you have some stability and some maturity with regard to both life and your own recovery. Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, I'm glad you raised it, because let's not get too rigid with the vocabulary and the words also. It's really, what's the function here? Yeah. Well, what do you need? Yeah, and that will change over age and time too.
Right. Great.
Thank you, everybody, for your wonderful, robust, and substantial conversations. Let's pray the prayer of transformation. I know it's a little bit longer and we've run a little bit longer in terms of our time together, but it's worth it. This is the prayer of transformation, as I call it, because it evidences the turning from the self-centeredness to other-centeredness, from that darkness to the light. It shows us the promises. It confirms the process. Please join me. Lord, make me a channel of your peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is discord, I may bring harmony, that where there is error, I may bring truth, that where there is doubt, I may bring faith, that where there is despair, I may bring hope, that where there are shadows, I may bring light, that where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds, it is by forgiving that one is forgiven. It is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. Amen. Yep. Dying of the false self, resurrection of the true self. And recently, as many of you have heard, I just love the darkness to the light. That is just like captures it for us. How much light do you want to walk in? How free do you want to be? Exactly. Yeah. Thank